Hello, everybody. We are so happy to have you back with us today. And today's topic is X-linked agammaglobulinemia, otherwise known as Brutons disease. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hey, and we're going to talk a little bit today about Brutons disease and how that kind of entered into our life. But we kind of have to go way back to the beginning to kind of set up how that unfortunate disease made it into our family. So Kim and I, our firstborn child is named Aiden, and he was born in 1997, so I just want to give some perspective as to timelines here because some things that maybe are available today maybe were not available back then. So Aiden was born in December in 1997 and seemed like a very healthy, happy child at first. And it took a little while for us to kind of notice some things with him, maybe physically, but when you see somebody every day, it's kind of hard to notice changes over time. So, and plus we were new parents, right? We were
trying to figure out.
We were trying to figure out
newborn
parenting and stuff like that. So, I think Kim has a real good perspective because she did all the nurturing and of Aiden when he was very young. But I think you started to notice some things pretty early on.
I would say like between 1 and 2. So between 1 and 2 years of age. And there were a few things. His speech, we were on top of that right away. I had him at a speech therapist at like 16 months old, 18 months old, somewhere around there. But he always started getting sick, just with normal things, every virus, that you can catch, just always sick. Colds, stomach flu.
And let me jump in there real quick because I don't know this to be true, but it was kind of that old wives' tale that maybe we were told. But when a child is born, or after a certain period of time, they still use a lot of the
their mother's immune system.
A mother's immune system.
Yeah,
and
a doctor told us that.
Oh, okay. So I don't know how long that typically lasts, but we did notice kind of a decline in his healthy, bouncy nature, and but again, we saw it every day, so it was slow, it was gradual, and didn't really notice anything because we had nothing to compare it to, right? I mean, it was our first child. So,
but then it got so bad, it was like just every holiday he'd be sick on the couch. Those are our videos and family photos, and.
Well, and with that too, not to keep interrupting,
it's okay.
but it seemed to be to me, and this is I know a conversation that we had, after the fact, but it seemed to me starting around maybe Halloween, all the way through.
Yep, springtime.
Maybe
summer.
Springtime. I know that sometimes if he would not be doing well around Halloween, Thanksgiving, usually on the couch, just kind of chilling. And certainly by Christmas, I remember a couple Christmases, I literally picked him up out of bed, sat him in front of the Christmas tree. He opened up his gifts, picked him back up with a toy or two, and kind of took him back to the couch or
just laid on the couch,
just so he could lay down and just because he wasn't feeling well.
So we spent many years just treating symptoms. It didn't really raise any red flags, and then he started school, and I'm a teacher, so he was at the school I was working at, so and we're both as parents with him every day, like we said, and sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees when you're in it all the time. And I just remember this one day, a colleague our son looked at me and said, "He is gray. You need to take him to a doctor." And it was another time when he wasn't feeling good, and So we did, and we went to the doctor, and
They would usually come back with, oh, it's the flu, or he
Right.
has pneumonia, or he's just sick. It's a virus, right? So you can't test for that. So let's run through that. And I don't know if we use Pedialyte, but I know that he was always dehydrated in some way. He wouldn't eat. He would drink. He almost looked emaciated sometimes.
oh, yes. And I need to back up. I jumped to kindergarten, but we need to back up to when he was 2 years old. So in that stage, and we were at home, so this is before school. We didn't know what to do. He was sick, got medicine, had been to the doctor, and he wasn't getting better. And all the other times he would get better. And I was very scared, like we said, new parents, and he was lethargic. And I think Carlos thought I was freaking out. So, I looked at him like, what do we do? Help me. And we had a wonderful pediatrician, wonderful. And we got him on the phone, and he would call, check on Aiden. And I had Carlos call him one time. Do you want to explain that conversation?
Yeah, and so maybe a half a step back. So Kim is very reactive, right, in a situation. So we need to do something right now. This needs to happen urgently. We need to fix this. I try to be a little bit more methodical in about understanding the circumstances and trying to find a smooth path forward. But this was one of the few times that I was probably at the same heightened level that she was at. Again, our son was emaciated. He just looked bad. He had almost a dry grin to his face. He was very dehydrated. And our pediatrician had a very unique, long last name. And when I called, I purposefully mispronounced their name because I wanted to start getting reactions. And I was like, look, if this was your child, what would you do in this situation? Because nothing's working. And we need to find something. So tell me what I need to do. If our son has to have, a temperature of 107, something ridiculous, that's what he has.
Oh, because at that point, we wanted to go to the hospital.
And we wanted him
We
admitted.
wanted him in the hospital
Yeah,
because we just didn't feel like we could do anything for him at home.
Yeah, and he looked so bad that I thought it was like, and there'll be times later on where there are life and death situations, but this was our first, this looks like a life and death situation.
And looking back now and knowing what we know and what you'll find out, it probably was.
Yeah. I mean, that's how close, that's how he looked. So I was like, what things do we need to tell you that he has to be admitted? And those are the things that he has.
But
And-
I'm sitting there watching him, and he's just going, just tell me what I need to say. What are the words I need to say?
So-
and I'll say them.
And that did happen. He was admitted, and they did a lot of things for him at that time to get him healthy again, but still.
Well, in that time, he was diagnosed with pneumonia, spent a couple days in the hospital, again, treated the symptoms, got him better, sent him home.
Yep.
So then we can speed up now to back to that story when he's in kindergarten and, they tell me, get him to the doctor. And we did. And he said, he needs to go to Cleveland. He needs to go to a bigger children's hospital. Asked me which one I wanted to go to. Said, go today. Don't wait. And I don't remember if they had... I think they did take blood. They did take blood. I went home and waited. The doctor called, and that's when he told me that. So I was at home alone with Aiden, and they're like, get up there, get to that children's hospital. And
You didn't even have a vehicle.
no, I did not. We had one car at the time, or one car that could make that long drive anyways. So I made arrangements with my sister-in-law to get me up there. I wasn't a big city driver at the time, and did not want to do that by myself. And Carlos happened to already be in that city at a sports convention, right? So then it became, we have to find Carlos. And he's in a huge, how would you describe that place?
Convention center.
Yeah.
It was a sports card memorabilia show and a huge convention center. And I remember you were trying to get everything situated with Aiden, and you had called our friends.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine.
To contact me. Somehow I was in the Cleveland IX Center, I believe, for the convention. And actually they got a hold of somebody in the convention center who went to one of the dealers there and was going to dealer to dealer to dealer saying, hey, do you know Carlos? And finally one of them said yes. And they watched that person's table while that dealer went around the show to finally find me. And
Yes.
when
Out of thousands of people.
yeah, there was a lot of people there, and luckily I'm tall, so I was hopefully easy to find. But as they walked up to me, I was like, "This seems weird to me," and I could tell by the look on their face. They were like, "You have a phone call in the office right now." I was like, "You mean I should call home?" They're like, "No, you have a phone call in the office right now. You have to go take." And at that point, I immediately knew it had something to do with our son.
Yep. So we all met up there eventually, and we were sitting in the emergency room. They just say, go to that emergency room, and we're just sitting there. And these doctors come out with these very serious faces, and they look at us, and they're like, you don't know why you're here, do you? We're like, no. So I think they got us admitted and everything
Yeah,
first.
because I don't think they didn't tell us anything in the emergency room per se. It wasn't until we went to, they said, we have to admit your son. We went to a little room inside Rainbow, so it was Kim and I. Our son was in the room admitted. And then 3-4 doctors walk in this little room and sit down in front of us. And I like the fact that they actually cut right to the chase, and didn't, stutter around it a little bit, but they just said, he has leukemia. Just like that. That bold, that blunt, that quick, that fast, that scary, that, and we just looked at each other. I don't even think we reacted.
Shock.
Yeah, it was a shock feeling. And yeah, that was our first day in Rainbows. Probably the first 15 minutes we were, there on the second floor.
Yeah, and then so this part is fuzzy. So, and again, we have a child that has had many two big major medical issues, but through many years of dealing with many different things. So I know my memory is foggy with this, but I do remember, so we get that initial diagnosis, we're in the room, but then they keep having these teams of doctors coming in to check him out. And I don't know if it was the next day or if it was late. It was the next day when they came in and said they needed to sit us down again.
Yeah. And at that point, they weren't sure about what it was, but they were sure about what it wasn't.
Correct.
And they had actually called in a specialist to come in because they had thoughts. So they came back and said, look, we don't believe it's leukemia. And I was like...
I about fell on the floor and immediately started crying with relief.
Relief, right. And, but my mind was blown because, it was like, gosh, it's almost, you hear this news of a death sentence, and then you hear, okay, it's not the death sentence, but we don't know what it is, so something that mirrors leukemia, is still needs to be vetted out or sussed out in some way.
Well, I remember them describing, so I'm now looking back, wondering if they were going based on the blood results, to make the leukemia diagnosis, but I remember them explaining that when they looked in the microscope, they were expecting to see leukemia cells, and instead of that, they saw nothing, or not what they were expecting to see.
Right.
So that sending every team, infectious disease teams, the endocrinology team, like just all these teams of doctors and it took them a few days
Right.
to figure it out.
Right.
And when they finally did, we met a wonderful doctor who was able to come in and explain it to us, that Aiden was born with an immune deficiency where his body, once my immune system wore off, you have B cells and T cells that help you fight off infections and things like that, and his B cells never mature. So to be able to do the job that they need to do. And then the good news was that they had treatment for it, so they couldn't cure it. So that began our journey of going to get infusions. So the treatment is getting an IV treatment. It's like this bag of fluid that gives him all the protections that would be in our B cells. And it takes like blood from hundreds of different people to make this one treatment. And he had to get that. We start off like every 4 weeks, or 3 weeks. 3 weeks to go get that.
Now, what are they treating? What's it called? Because you say it better than I do. So
it's called X-linked A-gamma globulinemia.
Right, and they call it
Brutons disease.
Okay.
That's for the scientists that discovered it.
Got it. Okay. So that diagnosis and that doctor came to us and said, look, we're going to have to do these treatments. I think initially Kim would go to Cleveland every 3 to 4 weeks with Aiden to get these infusions. We then talked about maybe having some home health care. Someone could come to our home and give the infusion, since how we would have to sit there for a couple, 3 hours. Plus they would give him Benadryl to start, so he'd always fall asleep. So it'd be nice if that all happened here at home.
Yeah.
Which it did.
It was years of treatment. I mean, when we were going to the doctor's office for it, that was an all-day affair. We would pack up snacks and the
Game Boy,
with the PlayStation, everything, movies, and you go into a little room with a recliner, and the IV runs for a few hours, and then they want to keep you a few minutes and make sure everything's okay. So we did that for quite a few years until we found out the option that you could have a home health nurse come and do it, and that was a big game changer too, just to be in the comfort of your home. And so we also had another wonderful experience with a healthcare worker. With that, we had the same woman who would come, and they almost become like part of your family because they're in your home and spending hours of time. And so that was our life from age 5 to about age 12. And the other thing that happened from that diagnosis was his spleen was enlarged. So with that meant no contact sports. So he had to be careful with it so it wouldn't rupture or anything like that. And we're a sports family. We both played basketball. I played volleyball. He played baseball. Our daughter's very athletic. Aiden was, doing t-ball and taekwondo and, all kinds of activities.
Golf.
And yeah, we had to stop those things. So golf, was his one thing he could still do because it wasn't contact. So we kept trying to get him into things that, he could do. But that was kind of a bummer as he got older and, the kids want a rough house and things like that.
Well, and to talk about some normalcy, right? So you're doing this from ages 5, for 5 or 6 years until age 12, right? That he is experiencing this every 3 weeks. And his frustration level with this is growing higher and higher as he has to continue to do this every year. So he was looking for some normalcy, and for him, he seemed to fixate a little bit on football, right? He wanted to do football, and that was the one true contact sport that doctors said no way.
Right.
So that kind of took us to the summer before, what, 7th grade?
Yep. Yep. And during 6th grade, he was so motivated to want to do some sports because they had kind of like intramural things at that time. So we did have his spleen checked out, and they did say, okay, he was good to go. He did play basketball
That's right.
during 6th grade. And then that summer, you're getting ready for junior high, and yeah, he wanted to play football. And at the beginning of summer, things were normal. We got a pool. He's a fish. He's always in there. And football was starting. And so he was allowed to play. And we got all the gear.
Yeah, we had went, it was like an event. We kind of, all the family.
It was a big deal.
Yeah, all the family got together, and we're going to go to a sports store, and we're going to buy cleats, and we're going to buy a mouthpiece, and we're going to, back then you had to boil it in water and have it adhere to your teeth. It was just, we were going through all of the sports rituals that you would for somebody to play junior high school football. And I remember walking through the store and feeling so happy that Aiden had the opportunity to do something that he had been begging us to do for years. And so Kim is taking him to practices in the summertime. She's a teacher, so she's off in the summer, so she's taking him to the 1 or 2 a day practices, and
in like 90-degree weather. It was so hot that summer, and those poor kids, they're outside, and they just were running laps around the field. It was conditioning. They were doing a lot of conditioning, and I got to give it to Aiden. He was in there pushing through, trying to do everything, but he would always get extremely tired and overheated after a few minutes, and he was trying to tough it out. And the coaches knew his history, so they were really good about it. I would sit there at the practices, and he would just always come over, have to take some of the equipment off and cool down and drink something, and he was just wiped out. He just couldn't do it. And I think he did that for maybe 2 or 3 practices and ended up on the couch and just was miserable and didn't want to go back. And that was so heartbreaking because I knew something was wrong.
And at that point, Kim came to me and said, look, Aiden's on the couch. He's really struggling at football practice. The coaches are being great, but I think Aiden's feeling like he's not keeping up with the other kids. I think he's a little deflated. So I wanted to go and talk to him, and as an athlete, past athlete, my first thought was, are you injured? Are you hurt? Are you sick? Are you ill? And he really didn't have an answer for it. He could not explain why he was feeling so bad. And
right.
We had also that summer, as Kim mentioned, just got a pool. And Aiden was a fish, and he loved being in the pool. He would go in the pool when it was like 60 degrees.
Yeah, he didn't care.
He didn't care, but he wouldn't even go in the pool. And I was like, well, do you want to go out to the pool and maybe just float around a little bit? No, he just wanted to lay on the couch. And so that instance took us back to another round of testing. And that testing was, well, it's typical with somebody with Brutons and we kept hearing that. And I was like, this just seems different, It seemed different to me, it seemed different to Kim, but most importantly, it seemed different to Aiden. And, so we would get those, your numbers, the IVIGs, which are the infusions that he was getting every 3 weeks.
Right, they were checking out those things.
They were checking out those numbers, and those are manufactured numbers, right? It's going to be whatever you infuse into him is what his
right.
blood work is going to look like.
Because he was getting it from somewhere else.
Right. So he wasn't producing it himself. So I think at some point he was just so strung out, so tired, so just not feeling well. And football had stopped at that point, I think the doctor was a different doctor, was a little frustrated with us, and I think we were sitting there and they're like, look, only way we're going to tell is if we do a bone marrow test.
Almost like as a scare tactic to
Yeah.
get us to be quiet, like, because who on earth would say, yeah, do a bone marrow test, do a spinal tap? And Aiden,
Without hesitation.
with no hesitation, do it. He wanted to know, he knew something was wrong, and he wanted to find out.
Yep.
So we did.
And so we scheduled the appointment to go up to Cleveland. We live in, about 50 miles away from Cleveland. So we went to Cleveland, went up to do the bone marrow test. And I think Aiden had a piece about him that he was going to find out. I think he was a little nervous about the procedure. Now, I was in the room with him. Kim could not see that
I
thing.
can't do
She
that.
can't look at that. She watches Grey's Anatomy and always covers her eyes when they're doing a surgical scene. But so I was in the room with him, and it was I wouldn't say brutal, but very, it's a
Barbaric.
not so, but you're
There.
drilling or
It's bad.
cutting into bone, right,
It's
to
bad.
get to the marrow. And it
Yeah.
was just, his body was moving, and at one point he started like waking up, and I'm like, he's a big kid, give him extra, I was afraid of what was going to happen. And
Just right there started a traumatic experience
Yeah.
because they just use like that Twilight stuff. They don't completely put you to sleep. So, yeah, he was a bigger sized kid than normal. So, what you would normally give, a typical 12-year-old, he probably needed more. So, they were scurrying because they ran out. You can't run out with,
they were literally running down the hall some more.
to get more. But
So he, went through that procedure, and I think when he finally woke up and we were kind of driving home, he had a piece about him that I'm going to find out.
yes.
And
Yeah, I think he was scared.
yeah, and so for us, that was a pretty big turning point because I think we were happy to find out what was going on, but I think what we find out just changed everything.
Right. We finally get some answers, and we're going to talk about that on our next episode.